Those of you that know Mick know he normally does brief introductions. And he took about half of what I was going to talk about, but it was a good lead-in, Mick. I did want to talk a little bit about, first, an update on where we are at, and then we'll delve into the earthquake piece in particular. So the title of this brief, and I think you see on the slides over there, it says NOC, and underneath Weapons Division. What the heck is a NOC, Weapons Division? That is the mission command at China Lake. China Lake's a unique base compared to all the other bases. Lemore's closest to here. That's an operational base. They train the squadrons and get them ready to go overseas. China Lake is a research, development, test, acquisition, and evaluation base, which is a very unique mission, very different. A lot of folks have a lot of trouble understanding it. It has a base landlord, and then it has the mission commander, Admiral Dillon, that Mick referred to. So just to give you an idea what the mission of the entire base is, we've got a short 50-second clip, if Terry can run that, please. For me, that's better than coffee in the morning to wake up. Thank you, and I have to start out with a disclaimer. I am not affiliated with the Navy any longer. I am not allowed to speak for them. I'm not Admiral Dillon. I am not the executive director for China Lake, the civilian Joan Johnson. But I do have an involvement through the China Lake Alliance, which is a 501c4 nonprofit that does a lot of informing, educating, and advocating the dirty L word for the base and the community. The other thing that's really interesting about China Lake and unique is that 85% of the workforce lives off the base. I'll give you the employment numbers in a minute, and I'll point out another huge difference. But let's talk first about what it does. China Lake is the Navy's and DOD's, really, although it has a Navy title, it's a national range. Premier Weapons and Air Research, Development, Acquisition, Test, and Evaluation Center of Excellence, and it was so designated under BRAC, the Base Realignment and Closure Process in 2005, designated it that. It develops technology for military applications, prototypes new weapons concepts, and works with industry to bring those items to the fleet. It supports industry in building our weapons and does testing to ensure the weapons perform as desired. China Lake is a strong military-civilian team where the military provides the knowledge of what they need in combat environments to be effective operationally, which the civilians don't understand. The civilians are Silicon Valley is our competitors, Google, Apple, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. Those are the folks we compete for. Those highly qualified technical folks are the ones that bring the technical knowledge, made it with the operational combat needs of the aviators working together and produce these products. Jointly with industry, China Lakes develops and tests the software that gives the aircraft its warfighting capability. It's not only the weapons. Most people know what Edwards does. It's got a long history of being in the public eye. Chuck Yeager, famous events at Edwards. They do most of the early flight test, vehicle exploration, handling characteristics, the ability to perform in new environments with new technologies. What China Lake does is make them a weapon system altogether. It is of critical national strategic importance for our national security. What I'm going to talk about, a little bit quick update, and then I'm going to give a challenge opportunity that builds right on what Mick led in with. NOCWD, as I just said, is the mission command. It's healthy, relevant, and in demand for the unique expertise and capabilities we just talked about that continue to grow in spite of the earthquake damage, and I have some demonstrated data on that. The can-do, get-it-done culture that they've had since 1943, November of 1943, when it was established under the pressure of World War II. They put together temporary facilities, baling wire, press don't say this, please, chewing gum, and have gotten things operating up to almost 90% capability, but the workforce is really hard-pressed and stressed to keep it going until we get this rebuild done. As I said, it started with Caltech and Navy in mid-40s, summer of 43, drove up north, up Highway 14, looking for a wide-open, remote place to do rockets development and testing and other weapons, including some of the conventional portions of the Manhattan Project were done there. And they found China Lake and said, we're doing it here, we're moving in, and they set up, there were 30 families in the Indian Wells Valley at that time, 30. And so they set up a community on the base. They built a company town on base to do all this almost overnight, built the airfield, built the facilities, and put it in place. There's 12 publicly acknowledged world technology firsts that have occurred at China Lake, many with commercial applications. There are others that aren't publicly acknowledged for a variety of reasons. The business model at China Lake is also really different. Most bases of any kind get mission funding from Congress. They get a check at the beginning of the year, and they operate to that funding. China Lake is mission funded. NOCWD is mission funded. They have their fee for service. They have to compete for the work with all the other Navy labs and industry to get that funding. That becomes relevant with regards to the reconstruction. I'm old school. I don't have my iPad notes. And with the late notice, we just scribbled here. China Lake has a lot of one-of-a-kind capabilities found nowhere else. Probably no one in this room, with the exception of Mick and very few others, know that it's the Navy's single largest land holding worldwide. 38% of all the Navy's holdings, 38% of all the Navy's land. 2 fully instrumented ranges and the main site cover more than 1.1 million acres, an area larger than the state of Rhode Island, larger than Rhode Island. It is covered by 19,600 square miles of restricted airspace overhead, and the land over the 1.1 million acres goes unrestricted to space, which is 1/8 of all of California's airspace. WD is financially strong today. It has in the past and still accounts for about 85% of the economic impact in the Indian Wells Valley. Last 5 years before the earthquake had been growing to 5 to 10% annually. The new orders received in the last year before the earthquake were $1.8 billion. Of about $1 billion gets contracted out. Around $200 million of that comes to Kern County, and there's a lower part of that I'll get to in just a second. There's about $30 million annually in small purchase credit card program that the base has, but Kern County is currently taking only around $2 to $3 million of that. There's missed opportunities across Kern here for what that economic engine across the Sierras is over there. The payroll for China Lake total is $565 million. That's the government employees on China Lake, not the contractors. There's additional monies from that. in spite of the earthquake and some of the shutdowns, and it was about 6 weeks from the time the two earthquakes hit back to back to where it was up and running, which was phenomenal. Nobody could believe it. 6 weeks from that date, we ran our first live missile test with a huge joint force exercise, live people, live weapons test, first demonstration, 6 weeks from the earthquake. If you were in that earthquake, that was pretty impressive to many of us. So we're aggressively hiring still, because most of the workforce was my age, because after the fall of the Soviet Union, we took a dividend in defense, and we downsized everything. We didn't even hire for 10 years, so we've got an aging workforce. Not anymore. Over 60% of the workforce is less than 10 years on board, so the demographics of the base and the demographics of the community are changing. So I said payroll is 565, the personnel numbers, the NOC-WD, the mission part of it is about 4,400 civilians and military, DOD civilians. Employment overall on the air station, NAWS, of which NOC is the primary mission, is 8,100, and that includes some contractors at all. So it's 8,100, and the job stimulation outside the gate is 5,000, roughly. And those are numbers from 2017 that remained constant after the earthquake. And the significant piece about that is all of our customers kept coming back. You would have expected, we expected a downturn. It didn't happen. China Lake is the only place you can do some of the stuff because of those unique physical attributes we have and the knowledgeable and qualified workforce and the innovative culture. So you put those together, that's our competitive advantage. So on the 4th and 5th of July, Mother Nature gave us her own fireworks show. The 4th was spectacular, and the 5th was beyond spectacular. Small anecdote, Mick and I and some other folks were sitting in the Tokyo House restaurant when the 7-1 hit, the second one after that. And you didn't ask for another beer right after that one. None of us did. There had been a 5-4 earthquake about 5 minutes before that, and the entire restaurant froze. And the instant the 5-4 was over, we were waiting to see what it was doing. When the 5-4 was over, people stood up and cheered and yelled. That's kind of the culture piece. And then the 7-1 hit, and the no cheering and the yelling was get out. So it was very visceral, but we all recovered from that. We began that night the work with our representatives from the city, county, state, and into, obviously, the federal government to get the funding that Mick talked about, and I'll mention just a little bit more about that. But that was a Herculean effort that went on up until the defense bills were signed on December 20th in the hangar at the Air Force Base. It used to be an Air Force Base, Joint Base Andrews outside Washington, D.C. by the President. And we got far more than we bargained for. We got, at this time, $3.0 billion in hand with orders to accelerate the reconstruction. What that does is it really demonstrates the recognition of how critical China Lake was to national security, in spite of the fact that for most of the 75 years of China Lake, it's been known in the Pentagon as the secret city, because much of what goes on there is classified. Most people don't know about it. So what we have, the epicenter of the first one, by the way, the 6.4, was right in the middle of the eastern side, what's called the China Lake Propulsion Lab, where we do everything that relates to energetics. That's everything that goes bang, boom, or whoosh, rocket motors, warheads, fuses, pyrotechnics. Even though it's called Propulsion Lab, it does all of that. That first one hit right there. The second one, 38 hours later, the 7.1, hit over just north of the airfield, right next to a couple of our other major laboratories. And that one obviously did a lot more damage, especially because of the weakened nature of what happened from the first one. So both epicenters were on base. The $3 billion is targeting, includes $2.4 billion of major military construction and about $627 for repairs, temporary facilities, demolitions, those kinds of things. The rest of the $1 billion is either already came from 19 or is going to come in the future. So that's the difference between 4.1 and 3. But that 3 covers, it's starting right away. And it covers Hangar 3 replacement, apron, taxiway, utilities, air operations facility, air traffic control tower, aircraft parking apron in support of 2 new hangars, advanced weapons hangar, integration lab, aircraft rescue and firefighting station, the tower. The tower was rendered in-op. Michelson Mission Systems Integration Laboratory, magazine, simple stuff, and a lot of the common community support facilities. The chapel was destroyed, base theater, the gym, pools, all that kind of stuff was destroyed. The rest of it starts later in this year, and it's going to be primarily the stuff that got over to the eastern side where the China Lake Propulsion Lab is, and some of that's even more complex. That's another $1.2 billion over there that comes out of the 3. So that's what was on tap as of December 20th, and we realized, oh my God, we are the dog that caught the bus. What are we going to do accelerating all this work? $3 billion is equal to the amount of all commercial construction done in California this year. So it's the same as all of California. So the Naval Facilities Command, NAVFAC, said we're going to come up and hold an industry day at China Lake on the 25th, and we want an opportunity. We need laborers to help the prime contractors get all this done in a timely fashion. We're going to hold this meeting up here. We're going to show the new accelerated schedule, and we're going to provide an opportunity for subcontractors to meet contractors. Probably going to be 200 to 300 show. 600 showed. And a great many of them were from over here in West Kern, and that was on purpose. Mick and others had led a charge. We need your support. Labor shortage for construction is across California, and obviously in our remote community. So the primes were very concerned with being able to do the labor, to being able to accomplish this reconstruction on time, and more importantly, we have to obligate that $3 billion in 1 year. That's a lot of work, going through all the proposals for all that contracts, getting that money obligated. I'm talking government financial terms now, but it's really important. If it's not obligated, it gets pulled away. And never again would you see something like this. So that provided an opportunity for the subcontractors to meet and partner, and the primes focus, what they're really working for is labor, berthing and housing for the labor, feeding of those folks, and materials. So that's the big challenge for the base. Here's the challenge and opportunity close for my discussion. The base challenge and community challenge is to rebuild quickly, because that workforce is stressed, and restore full mission capability for China Lake. It has to be rapid, and we have to minimize the impact to the community and the leave behind for the community. We're a small community. You get an influx of a couple thousand people for 5 to 7 years that this whole thing could take, and it could be devastating what's left behind if we overbuild in response to that. Many of you are aware of some of those problems. When we get done, we'll have the most modern lab and ranges in the nation. So we not only have the commitment demonstrated by the $3 billion and other monies coming as to the critical national importance of it, talking about the long-term value of China Lake, but now we're going to be able to compete even better, and the opportunity for growth is tremendous. So we need Kern County's engagement. We're looking for, especially as we perform this project, with your help from this side of the hill, is let's start developing the relationships that are going to continue what Mick talked about. So we know we're on different economic cycles, east and west. We're aerospace over there, as Mick talked about. Renewable energy, it has different business cycles than our other two primary over here, oil and ag, which is under threat for water. They're both under threat. And that isn't going to change. So we need to continue to broaden the economy. We think this is an opportunity to build the relationships with you, help ourselves out, help the county out, become a better integrated community. Some of China Lake, some of Ridgecrest is actually naturally, because they go to LA a lot, more acquainted with Palmdale, Lancaster, and they could be better acquainted over here. And we've been working on this for a while. So my final comment is we really look forward to working across Kern County with you to get the base backed up to speed as soon as we can and develop this path for the future and help diversify the economy. Look forward to knowing a lot more of you better than I do today. Thank you.